Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sarah McLynn. Harold Sasko was born in Titusville, Florida, on September 11, 1961, and later became a resident of Kansas City. His family had 12 siblings, and he was known to be responsible and help his siblings with housework. After college, Harold opened his own pizzeria and expanded his business, opening 2 more restaurants in Lawrence and Topeka. In 1990, he relocated to Lawrence with his then-wife Anna and their 3-year-old daughter Mendez. Following this move, he also launched a 3rd restaurant in the nearby city of Topeka. However, his dedication to his business led to problems in his personal life, causing a rift in his marriage and eventually a divorce. Harold was a respected member of his church and prided himself on being a dedicated man. Those who know him find him to be kind, thoughtful, and meticulous in his management work. However, on January 17, 2014, Harold vanished unexpectedly, leaving behind many unanswered questions surrounding his disappearance. The day started like any other Friday, with the weekend just ahead. People continued to go about their daily business, including the staff at his pizza shop. However, when they arrived at work, they found the restaurant deserted and quiet. Typically, Harold would be there to open the kitchen, but he was nowhere to be found. What's more, no one had heard from him in several days, which was unusual. Concerned for Harold's safety, staff contacted police and asked them to check on him at his home on West 26th Street. Later that day, an officer visited Harold's residence, knocking on the front door and window, but receiving no response. The officer then looked inside and saw a man lying face down on the floor. Police entered the house and confirmed the man was Harold. He was lying in a pool of his own blood and had clearly been dead for several days. Moreover, the scene suggested that Harold's death was no accident. His hands were bound behind his back with zip ties, indicating that someone had intentionally restrained him. His legs were also tied, further suggesting a deliberate act. The most disturbing detail, however, was the deep gash in his throat, which had severed the bone and made survival impossible. The officers were confronted with a gruesome scene. In addition to the ties and the fatal wound, the police found several empty bottles at the opposite end of the room, as well as a phone and laptop that didn't belong to Harold. They also noted that Harold's car was missing from the driveway. One peculiar piece of evidence was the word "freedom" scrawled on the wall in Harold's blood. As the police presence in the Harold's house, this attracted the attention of curious neighbors. The officers decided to use this to their advantage by asking more questions. Through these investigations, that they discovered Harold wasn't living alone. Neighbors reported that he was living with a girl he referred to as his stepdaughter. This information proved crucial for the investigation, as it revealed that there was someone who not only knew Harold well and had regular contact with him but was also likely present at the crime scene. It was eventually confirmed that the stepdaughter was 18-year-old Sarah McLynn, who had been living with Harold for the past 2 years. However, Sarah was missing. This caused the police to become suspicious. Finding her became a top priority, as her disappearance left many unanswered questions. She could have been a victim, witness, suspect, or none of these. It was crucial to locate her. Then police notified Harold's family and friends about the incident. A funeral for Harold was planned for February 8, 3 weeks after the incident. The police asked the public to contact Douglas County forensic investigators with any information about Sarah's location. A $1,000 reward was offered for any information that could help find her. Sarah McLynn was born on July 9, 1994, in Topeka, Kansas. She was raised in a loving family with her parents and 2 siblings. And she had an especially strong bond with her sister. As a child, Sarah was known for being shy and kind. She spent most of her childhood being homeschooled, which limited her social circle to her neighborhood. However, her life took a challenging turn when her parents divorced during her teenage years. This significant change had a profound impact on Sarah, making her more vulnerable. As she adjusted to her new situation, she encountered challenges that made her teenage years even more difficult. After her parents separated, Sarah's previously sheltered life left her vulnerable to people who exploited her innocence. Sadly, she experienced abuse from a neighbor, which altered her personality and behavior. Her mother was deeply concerned about this change because she found it difficult to adapt to the new way of life among them. Sarah started secretly leaving her house at night to spend time with a bad crowd. This led to her frequently using drugs and alcohol to cope with her emotional pain. After her parents' divorce, Sarah, 14, no longer wanted to live at home and found a job at a pizzeria to start a new life. Her manager, Harold, 50, initially seemed kind, but rumors among staff suggested otherwise. He told other managers to only hire young, attractive women. While working at the pizzeria, Sarah's routine consisted of waking up, going to work, spending time there, and returning home. However, she often spent her nights drinking before going back to her family's house. Reports indicate that Sarah was usually sober only at work, but even then, her work efficiency is still not high. Despite frequently showing up drunk and nearly getting fired multiple times, she kept her job, likely because Harold felt sorry for her and knew she needed support. When Sarah turned 15, she experienced another traumatic incident, where a man attacked her and burned her with cigarettes. After that, Sarah's mental health, which was already fragile, deteriorated significantly. She stopped attending work, lost friendships, and fell into a deep depression. Within a year, at just 16 years old, she attempted to end her life. Thankfully, her family found her in time and called for medical help. Following a 5-month hospital stay, Sarah made a full recovery. Upon her hospital discharge, Sarah was touched by the support she received from her loved ones and friends. Among the messages of support she received, one in particular caught her attention, a message from Harold, who used to be her supervisor. Harold offered to be Sarah's confidant, someone she could confide in. He would drive her around, take her out to eat, and listen to her problems. Since Sarah had no one else to turn to, she eventually accepted Harold's help. During one of their outings, Sarah opened up to Harold about her past, sharing her traumatic experiences with men, her drinking, and other struggles. Harold realized that she wanted to move out of her family's house. Upon learning about Sarah's traumas, he suggested she move in with him. Although the offer raised some concerns, Sarah was in a vulnerable state, feeling lost and hurt. Harold's offer provided her with an escape, and at 17 years old, she agreed to live with him. Sarah's life seemed to settle down after she moved in with Hal. She found a new job, away from the pizzeria, and Harold took good care of her. Her dog moved in too, and she even thought about attending college. However, Sarah's mother, Michelle, was not pleased with the situation. She found Harold odd and the whole story suspicious. Whenever Michelle wanted to discuss this issue with Sarah, their conversation would become tense, and they would argue loudly, causing Sarah to distance herself even more. Michelle doubted that Harold's intentions were as pure as he claimed. She worried that Sarah was too naive to see the potential issues. After her parents' divorce, Sarah's father had cut off all contact, leaving a void that she was trying to fill. The situation became even more unsettling when Harold asked Sarah to call him Dad and told their neighbors that she was his stepdaughter. As the news spread, Sarah's colleagues started asking about her relationship with Harold. Sarah would tell them that he was just a friend, but from the outside, it seemed unusual for a 50-year-old man to take in a troubled 18-year-old girl. Her peers likely suspected that something was off. After Sarah turned 18, she felt uneasy as Harold's behavior changed drastically. He started buying her alcohol and illegal drugs, made jokes about them being in a romantic relationship, and even suggested a sexual relationship. Harold kept a record of everything he spent on her, including rent, cosmetics, and substances, in an attempt to make her feel indebted to him. He made it clear that she couldn't leave until she paid him back. As a result, Sarah felt trapped and eventually gave in to Harold's advances, leading to a 10-month period of a sexual relationship with the man she once considered a father figure. They had sex several times a week, and Sarah's only way to cope was to consume alcohol and use substances, further increasing her debt to Harold. Harold's behavior was inconsistent, often criticizing Sarah one moment and complimenting her the next. For instance, he would mock her appearance, specifically her nose, and then offer to pay for plastic surgery, which Sarah, unsure of herself, eventually agreed to. Harold treated her like an object he owned, rather than a person with feelings. He exerted control over her by covering expenses, including $16,000 for dumb implantation and planning to spend another $16,000 on breast implants. These costs would be added to her debt, forcing her to pay him back when she was financially able. Feeling trapped, she felt she had no way to escape this situation. Harold became even more controlling and threatening. He claimed he would not let her escape, which made her mental health problems worse. To cope with her situation, Sarah was prescribed antidepressants. However, this ended up adding to her financial burden, as she also had to pay for the medication. Sarah had reached her breaking point, and her mind was haunted by dark memories of her abusive past and the terrible burden of depression. She often found herself on the brink, struggling to cope. Just when she thought she had found someone she could trust, that person turned out to be an abuser. This was the final blow for Sarah, and she began to act in ways that would transform her from victim to killer. After visiting a pet store, Sarah purchased a rabbit and signed a waiver, then took it home. Later that evening, a manager from Harold's pizzeria visited her house for dinner and drinks. When he opened the refrigerator, he was shocked to find a rabbit carcass instead of beer. Sarah admitted to killing the rabbit and revealed that it was not her first victim. The manager, feeling utterly perplexed by the circumstances, accepted the dinner invitation out of politeness, but left for home afterwards. This was a significant warning sign that hinted at Sarah's potential for violence, but it was overlooked. It was later questioned whether Sarah was truly capable of harming a human being. Initially, Sarah was reported missing. However, as the investigation progressed, she became the prime suspect. Detectives soon discovered that she had packed her belongings, taken the dog, stolen a car, and left town. Although initially believed to be heading to Texas, Sarah changed her plans and went to Florida, drawn by the warmer weather and scenic ocean views. Based on this new information, she was officially declared a wanted person. Sarah was a prime suspect in Harold's murder and considered mentally unstable, posing a threat to others. As a result, she was the subject of a nationwide manhunt that lasted for 11 days, with many officers across the country on the lookout for her. On January 25, 2014, after evading capture for over a week, Sarah McLynn was finally apprehended in Everglades National Park. She was found sleeping in Harold's stolen car with a loaded gun beside her. The police also discovered $2,400 in cash, 2 additional guns, an axe, and several knives, one of which had Harold's blood on it. Following her arrest, Sarah underwent a 3-hour interrogation, during which she confessed to the murder. According to her account, on January 14, 2014, Harold returned home from work and decided to fix the broken sound system. He requested Sarah to bring him a beer, and then another, and another. Harold collapsed to the floor in exhaustion, unaware that Sarah had slipped a large dose of sleeping pills into one of the beers he was drinking. Sarah had already made up her mind that Harold had to be killed. Sarah restrained him with zip ties, grabbed a hunting knife, and slit his throat. As a result, Harold died shortly after. Following the incident, Sarah took a shower, washing off the blood while listening to her favorite music. She then called her workplace, claiming she would be out for a few days due to a family member's passing. Sarah packed her belongings, including a photo of her sister, took the dog, and fled in Harold's stolen car under the cover of night. To avoid detection, she left her cell phone and laptop behind. During the interrogation, Sarah openly discussed her motives. She explained that she had been trapped in the house Harold's, deeply in debt to he sought to control her. As a result, she became his target, suffered abuse, and was eventually treated as his property. Sarah's anger fueled her desire for revenge, and she was willing to face any consequences to achieve it. In her conversations, she revealed a disturbing fascination with violence and admitted to having thoughts of it for 2 years. Additionally, in a disturbing admission, Sarah confessed to killing rabbits simply out of curiosity. Sarah's confessions put her in a precarious situation, as she not only admitted to killing Harold but also took pleasure in violent acts. It became evident that Sarah would have to stand trial. However, her confessions also showed that she was a woman dealing with difficult mental health problems. Therefore, it was necessary for her to undergo a psychological evaluation to better understand her mental state. The evaluation would help identify any underlying psychological disorders, in addition to her newly expressed tendency towards violence and her reports of memory lapses, during which she felt detached from her own mind. After a thorough assessment, Sarah was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. As it turned out, Sarah had multiple personalities within her, each representing a different side of her complex character. These included Vanessa, a fierce warrior, Alice, the sensitive and emotional part, and Mila, a feminine, gentle side. However, the most tragic version of them was the unnamed individual who bore the full weight of the trauma and depression. During Sarah's trial, her defense team centered argument around dissociative identity disorder. According to Sarah, one of her alternate personalities, Alice, had suicidal thoughts but was convinced by her other personalities not to harm herself. Instead, they collectively decided that killing Harold was the only solution. The defense team argued that Sarah was in a state of clinical dissociation when she committed the crime, implying that she was not fully in control of her actions. However, the prosecution argued that despite the severity of the abuse Sarah suffered from Harold, the investigation suggested it was consensual. Despite acknowledging the authenticity of Sarah's mental disorder, the judges ultimately found her guilty of murdering Harold. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 50 years, a verdict that shocked both Sarah and her family. The sentencing decision raised concerns that the court had not adequately considered the long-term abuse Sarah endured and her mental state at the time of the crime. As a result, many felt that her punishment was disproportionately harsh. In response, Sarah filed an appeal, arguing that the court should have taken her history of abuse into account during the trial. Fortunately, by that time, more evidence of Harold's horrific behavior had come to light. Upon analyzing his computers, detectives discovered a large collection of illegal pornography. Furthermore, another woman reported that Harold had abused her 2 daughters. Considering this new evidence, Sarah's appeal led to a reduced sentence of 25 years, a 50% decrease from the original sentence. Despite this new information, Sarah remains incarcerated. The judge acknowledged that Harold had indeed abused and manipulated Sarah, but emphasized that this did not justify her premeditated murder. Initially, Sarah was a victim of Harold's exploitation. He was a master manipulator, deceiving many in with his charm. Some individuals still recall his generosity, as he had helped employees in financial. Harold's family acknowledges his wrongdoing but also remembers his positive qualities. They believe he needed help, not death. Similarly, Sarah's family agrees that she should face consequences for her actions but thinks the sentence was too severe, given the circumstances of her trying to escape her abuser. Harold was a complex individual, well-liked by many, yet with a darker side. His story shows how life's difficulties, traumatic incidents, and not having enough support can result in very unfortunate consequences. Sarah was abused by someone she trusted, suffered lasting damage to her mental health. However, this trauma does not excuse her intentional killing of another person. Ultimately, Harold's story teaches us to look beyond a person's appearance, as their true nature may be hidden. Harold, perceived as kind and generous, was actually manipulative and predatory.